What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Tribe of Runners. I'm your host, Liz Myers, and today I have the man of the talk of the town right now, Kilian Korth, on the podcast to chat all things running. But I am going to warn everyone, it probably will get a little weird because Kilian and I are good friends. We know each other, and it probably will be about running, but not completely and like dialed in on running, which I'm very excited about. So welcome, Kilian, to the podcast.
Hey Liz, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Heck yeah. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I reached out and was like, hey man, whenever things simmer, I know life is going crazy. Please let me know. I'd love to have you on the podcast. And then randomly one day you texted me and was like, hey, when are we gonna be on the podcast? I'm like, let's go. I got so excited.
Yeah, me too. Like I've told you before, I have high expectations,
I
So
know, I know.
I'm waiting to see what happens.
The pressure is on. So again, I just to like give a little background, Kaylee and I both work on the Everyday Ultra racing team. We have grown to become really good friends. At least I hope we're friends. And like we just share like the craziest conversations like about philosophy, about life, about like some shit talk here and there. We're people, but it has been an amazing friendship that we've grown. And one thing I think that you and I really bond on is philosophy. And we talk a lot about like books we're reading and things that we think are, like going on and super, super crazy. You're always trying to get me to read different books than my type of books I read and listen to. But like, where do you find running and philosophy in life? Like, well, I'm just going straight into it with
Yeah,
philosophy with you and I, because that's just kind of how we roll. But I've heard you talk about it a little bit on other podcasts, like how you like stoics and you feel like you are, but yet they're a little on the negative side. But like, how's that lifestyle for you and running both combined?
sure. Yes, I wouldn't necessarily sign on the dotted line with Stoics on the negative side. Like I would say, rather than being negative, it's sort of joyless. Like that's
Mm.
not those can sound like synonyms, but I don't think they exactly are because I think you know having your like ups and downs be a smaller wave pattern than a bigger wave pattern is overall probably a good thing. But I don't know if you've ever met anyone who is just kind of placid 100% of the time, and that's not, I think, optimal. I think you do want to still have ups and downs. So that's where I kind of depart from the Stoics. But how does it relate to running? I mean, what is the point of philosophy? Philosophy is to learn about life and to learn about yourself, and ultimately, kind of groping towards what the Greeks called eudaimonia, which is like enlightenment. And so running is just an optimal tool for learning about yourself, especially running long distances. You just have lots of time to think. I most often do not run with headphones. So running is, I try to actually meditate every day, but running is also a meditative activity. And so I spend a lot of time thinking and kind of exploring, sort of letting the conveyor belt of thoughts sort of take hold. And wherever that gets me during a run is often quite interesting. So that's how I see them connected is the exploration of life. It's the exploration of oneself, the exploration of one's own mind and consciousness and like your personal experience. I think the biggest mystery of the world is we're made of inert matter that ultimately results in us having an experience. So like, how does that happen? And I think about that all the time when I'm running. I'm just looking around, experiencing, the ground beneath my feet, my breath in my lungs, wind in my hair. And sometimes, running can just be a vehicle for developing a closer sense of what that all feels like and means to you as a human being, but also just like as a conscious animal on the planet. And so I think the two things for me, the physical activity of running and the mental activity of philosophy, are just inextricably linked. Unlike ancient philosophers sort of thought, where you know Socrates, Plato sort of had disdain for activities of the body. They didn't really, they sort of saw the body as like a cage for the mind. But I think developing that, I think that is an unwise ultimately way to look at things, because I'm a materialist. I think your brain is created, your brain and your body are working to create everything that's happening. And so having them linked and having them be kind of one activity is, my way of searching for enlightenment or a higher way of living, whatever that means. That's not a moral value. It's just a statement of how I feel about approaching the task.
Yeah, and I love that. And it's so true in the aspect of like, and I think you actually just posted about like being in the flow state in a run. Did I see that right?
Yeah, yesterday. It's just
Yeah.
like sometimes, you go on a run and all of a sudden you're there. Most of the time
Yeah.
that doesn't happen, but the days that it does is just amazing.
Yeah, and I have a question for you, and then I'll kind of go back to like what I was saying. But like, do you consider that to be like a runner's high?
I don't know. I don't think it's the same thing as a runner's high because I think you can be in a flow state doing a lot of different activities. Like
Mm.
I'm a writer and I've written novels and stuff. And so like the most recent story I wrote, I was in a flow state straight for like 22 days while writing it. And so that is the same experience I'm having while running. And so I don't think it's like your typical runner's high. Like I think the runner's high is based on endorphins and physical
Mhm.
processes within your body. Like a flow state is also a matter of physical processes, but it feels as if you're in touch with something much deeper. Whereas the runner's high feels a little bit more like a drug experience, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I have heard people say like, yeah, they feel the same to me. I'm like, I don't think you're in the flow state then. Like
No.
the flow state is so different. And I liked how you said, you kind of said like you will be doing something and like everything just kind of passes. Like it is such a flow. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
you're just like going and you're cruising if you're running or you're writing or maybe you're biking, wherever the case may be, where like life is just going on and you're just kind of cruising and doing it. And you don't even, not to say you don't realize, because you definitely do, but it's just a whole different feeling and aspect in that.
Yeah. I
But
think that like the the characteristic of a flow state that is most important is like the coalescing of experience into one thing. It's like
Mhm.
typically I feel like you have touch, taste, like your senses are sort of separate. Whereas in a flow state, it sort of feels like you're having one single experience. Whereas, our brain is attempting to differentiate most of the time in our daily lives between, oh, I'm distracted by my thoughts, oh, I'm touching this, oh, I smell something. Like, you feel that all these things separately. And in a flow state, it's like one experience.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said, well said. And it's something that you kind of said this too, like it doesn't happen often, and I feel like a lot of people haven't experienced it. Um and obviously you are running well over the normal average mileage of normal, quote unquote normal average people. And for it to randomly pop up on a random, Tuesday, Monday, and you just say, I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's impressive. But do you have an idea or an assumption on why and how we get into it?
I do in a very zoomed out way. I think that it's mostly about training your attention. There's
Mhm.
experiences available that can facilitate this, but I think part of it is having a skill set with how to pay attention specifically to stimuli that are both physical, mental, all the same thing, right? And just being able to kind of pull back from the conveyor belt of thoughts. So most of us spend a lot of time just living with the conveyor belt, like zip, zip, zip. Here's another thought. Here's another thought. Here's another thought. Right. And so if you can focus on your breath, if you can focus on the way your feet sound on slick rock and in the sand, those types of things, like that's a way to kind of facilitate yourself into a flow state. And I feel like I'm better at it than average, but I'm still terrible at it. And like most of the time it happens accidentally. Like yesterday, I'm on a run. I'm exploring. I know the area pretty well, but I was exploring some new trails. It was like 28 degrees when I started, and I started cold, and I started in gloves and a t-shirt, because I knew that I was going to warm up. But there's all this stuff that you can focus on, the tingling in your arms, the kind of goosebumpy feeling of the cold whenever there's a little bit of a breeze. Then, there's the alpine glow rising above as the sun rises above the mountains. So I think sometimes it's just a perfect set of circumstances that allows it to happen. Like
Mhm.
yesterday, it just felt like luck. Somehow I also felt really good after, you know, sitting for 5 hours for a tattoo session the day before and driving 4 hours. And then, so I was expecting to kind of feel crummy. And then all of a sudden I'm running and I feel great. So all of those things are just like luck based. But I do think the trainable skill set to help you get into flow states is meditation, like the ability to pull back. And so in a race, or in a hard training run, that's really helpful when you start having like negative thought and negative self-talk going through your brain, because you can just kind of take some deep breaths, focus on some other things, and sort of remove yourself from just being smacked around by all the thoughts that are flying at you moment by moment.
Yeah. And I will say this, and this is something I wanted to talk about. So this is maybe like a hard right turn, but you are really good at avoiding, like, not to say the negative talk, because I'm sure at times the negative voices get loud and you have to be like, oh crap. But you are very good, from what I can see, at like getting out of that and or tricking yourself to get out of it. Like we talked about you and your feet tapping and like it being a metronome, and that's how you got through. And I've heard you talk about that too. But also, like, when you don't want to do something, like, you make yourself do it. A prime example, we talk about this, and I heard you talk about it with Joe, which, if you have not listened to the Everyday Ultra podcast episode with Kilian and Joe, go listen to it. It is a long one, but it's really good. It's hilarious. I was laughing the whole time. But you talk about like palate fatigue and how, like, yeah, it happens to you, but like you just have to fucking do it. Like it's that simple. You need the food, you need the fuel. And me and you have talked, obviously, and we have talked about this, where like it's hard because a lot of people will be like, well, I didn't know what to do and I didn't feel like doing it. And it's like, well, you just do it anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So kind of explain that for us and your mindset and thought process with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that again, it's all trainable, and ultimately these are skills that you just kind of have to learn, and you embrace the fact that they're hard at first, right? Like if you take up an instrument, you're not going to be a great guitar player from the get go. Most people are not Mozart, writing concertos at the age of 3. So it's all starting from zero for most people, right? And so when you have the voice in your head that's telling you not to do the thing that you should be doing, it's hard to beat it at first. So do you want me to go into the castle analogy that I used on the Everyday Ultra podcast?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Cool. So I came up with this on the spot, which I was pretty proud of. But basically, I've started thinking of the voice in your head, that's telling you to stay in bed or stay cozy, and oh, it's cold outside, blah blah, like all these reasons to not do the things you want to do. It's like this king in a castle, and so the first time you go to take over that castle, you're going to lose a lot of guys. Like your army's decimated, but you end up in there and you're just like beaten up and you're like bloody going into the grand hall or whatever. But as you do it more and more, you get better at besieging that castle. So by the end, you're Genghis Khan and you're dictating terms to this little weak voice who's sitting on the throne in your castle, right? And then when you get good enough at beating that voice, you own the castle. So you're sitting on the throne, and it just, the trainable mindset is good enough that you don't even have to think anymore about beating that voice, right? Like it's just never framed to myself as an option to listen to it, right? And that being said, you can make some caveats, like if I get a terrible night of sleep, like I'm going to make smart training decisions, right? But that's not me losing to the voice. That's ultimately me beating the voice, really, and then that same voice talks to you in races. So if you're in a runnable section of a 100-miler, that prior to the race, you're like, I'm going to run this whole thing. That voice is going to be like, dude, you can walk. Doesn't matter. Like, oh, your 22-hour goal that you're going for, like how different is it really if you finish in 23:50? Like you'll be fine with that, So that voice is just whispering in your ear the whole time, like some little serpent coming out of the tree of knowledge, And you can either choose to give into that, or again, you can hold the throne. Like you can let that king, he's come back, he's stronger than ever. But you got to build your moat, you got to build your walls. You got to have defenses against siege engines. Otherwise, that voice is going to beat you. And so learning not to give into that makes not giving into it easier in the future. And I mean, this connects back to our initial conversation about philosophy. We've talked in the past about Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and I actually timed a rereading of that with the first race this year, the Tahoe 200. And you can learn a lot from this guy who was the emperor of the Roman emperor, like this, he's basically like a god king on earth who seems incredibly level-headed about things, something like 11 of his kids died. He's dealing with plague constantly. So it's not, he had a privileged position in the society, but it's not like he had an easy life,
Mm-hmm.
and his journal has now come down to us. And so why not take techniques that this guy used dealing with problems that are ultimately so much bigger than most of us will ever face in our lives to deal with the small things,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he ever let that voice win, right? So if he can do it, then why not us too?
Yeah, yeah. And it's so true. And um I think it's awesome that you read that book right before Tahoe. Like, what a good segue. And you and I know you'd read it. We talked about it. I think it's awesome, and I think everyone at one point in their life should read it and then probably reread it once or twice again in different parts of life. Because as you know, when you read a book, the second time you read it, you learn something you didn't know the first time, or you see something differently the second time again. But it's not like you, and I love you dearly, but it's not like you are anything special other than like you've learned to do or to not listen to that voice. You know what I mean? Like we all have this capability to do that. You're just really fucking good at it, and you can just fucking go. You know what I mean? And where a lot of us, myself included, like I've been in races and had it talk and like can't get out of it, can't get out of it. I'm like struggling, and I was like, oh, I'm so mentally strong, and then in my 200, I'm like, no, bitch, you're not. Like you got to go back to the drawing board. But we all do that. Like there's moments in life, I'm sure that you had dealt with the negative voices and didn't overcome them, or you did, but it took more than what you expected or anything of that sort. Like we're all human. We're all trying to do our best at the end of the day. And you've just really grown to overcome the voices, which is incredible. And I think I know you talked about this in nutrition aspect too. Like you're so dialed in, and I hate to say strict because that sounds really bad, but like you're very strict with your diet. You are, all the T's and the I's are dotted, and there's very little curving or exceptions into it. And I think that's amazing, and it just really shows how disciplined you are as well. But you know what your goals are, you know what I mean, and you're
Yeah.
not going to deter from them, which I think is incredible. Um, and this kind of takes me back, and um, I saw your post of your younger self, and I'm not gonna lie, I died a little inside. It was so funny. But the reason I'm saying this is that first picture that you posted. How old do you think you were then?
It was 2018, so I was 23.
Okay, and would like in that moment in time, what were the big differences between you then and now?
I mean, I don't think the most cocky early 20-year-old male, but I was a cocky early 20-year-old male, like I literally was going into a 100-miler thinking, and I remember saying this to myself, like, how different could this be from 50 miles? How, like, that's so stupid. It's twice the distance. But I'm like, how different could it be? And
Mhm.
so that's the biggest difference is like, I don't know how it exactly happened. Maybe it was, some contemplative experiences. Maybe it was a mixture of those and running ultras that just like slap you down and teach you lessons, or I had some experiences, in the outdoors training that were really scary where I made mistakes, So learning from those, either you are a moron and you're going to continue to just like push forward and you're going to be like, oh, look at me, I'm the best. Or you're going to be like, holy shit, like I almost died, or I could have died, or I was totally unprepared and tried to feel a 100-miler on Cliff Bars and bananas. And then my second 50 took 21 hours. Like, so you've got all these, like, I just got slapped down by all these different lessons, And so that's the biggest difference is like, even now I am dialed, as you say, like I don't frame a lot of things in my life as options, so I don't actually feel like I'm being air quotes disciplined in making decisions because I just don't make that many decisions. Like it's not an
Mhm.
option to get the Domino's pizza when I'm on a road trip, despite how hungry I might be after running a 50K in the mountains. This is just not going to happen. So I don't frame that many things as options. But the biggest difference is like I just feel super like humble, and that's not like I'm not attempting to say like humble brag. I feel humble in the grand scheme of things. Like looking up at a night of stars makes you feel humble. I'm like I don't know
Mhm.
that much. I'm a little tiny speck. You see an elk or a mountain goat running through running up a hill and you're like, man, I'm such a bitch. I might be a decent human being at running, but compared to everything else, I am so weak and tiny and fragile. And so I just constantly am, you do hard things and you're constantly faced with that fact. You're going to fail. You're going to have days that suck. You're going to potentially have days where you're in danger because of stupid things you did. And so all of that, like, between the age of 23 and probably like 26 or thereabouts, is like, okay, like my cocky mindset is 100% unsustainable. It's like, either you're going to just continue to dig yourself a hole, or you're going to start being a practical person and learn. And so again, it's just like, I don't think I made a decision, but I was like, I want to be good at ultra running, and you're not going to do it if you're cocky. So there you go.
Yeah. It's I'm not gonna lie. I can only imagine the cocky Kilian, because you're just the most humble person I've met. Like, everyone that has met you and they're like, oh my God, I got to meet Kilian at Javelina. And I was like, what do you think? And they're like, he's so chill. And in my mind, that's them saying, like, you're so humble. And like, yes, like he is super humble. So you have, tremendously learned a lot, obviously, and are now out here crushing 200 plus miles and all that good stuff. But did you, at that age too, envision yourself being a 200 plus mile runner? Was it more of like you wanted to go see how this 100 went and then kind of see how things go? What was that kind of like for you?
Yeah, so here's another example of cocky Killian somehow. But so I finished my first 100 in 2018. I finished. It was a totally imperfect race, right? But right after that, I was like, oh, this is going to be my career. Why did I
Oh.
think that? I have no idea. I mean, I wrote a blog post after the Tahoe 200 this year called Delusional Self-Belief. And back
Mhm.
then, it was actually delusional, Like, I had no evidence that I could do this, but in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm good at this, even though I didn't have any reason to think that, really. But I did quickly know that I was going to get into 200s, because I
Mhm.
went from doing 100, and then I had heard about the Colorado Trail and FKTs and stuff, and I was like, okay, I want to do that. Like, I want to set the Colorado Trail FKT. And so after a couple experiences of, again, like, being humbled by the outdoors, it was kind of like, what is the intermediate step between the Colorado 100 miler and the Colorado Trail FKT? Like 200 milers, obviously, right?
Mhm.
So, starting in 2022, I was like, all right, we're doing 200s now. And ultimately, in my head, I sort of saw it as like a stepping stone to getting to the Colorado Trail, because that had been my goal since, day one of being an ultra runner, essentially. So yeah, I mean, I would have, again, at that stage, I would have foreseen the 200 journey going much smoother and much faster. That was not the case. Hence why, my documentary that's going to come out next year is going to be called Forged in Failure. There's plenty of lows on the way to the success with the Triple Crown this year. But yeah, I mean, I kind of always knew, I'm like, I'm not capable of being as fat. I'm like, I'm never going to compete at Javelina, for instance,
Mhm.
like, I might be able to, like, eke out a top 10 finish if I, like, totally had a good race and optimized for it, but there's no chance I'm running a 12:10 100 mile. Like, it's just not happening. So what was the move there? It's like, okay, let's go longer. Let's, like, play to my strengths, the mental toughness, the fortitude, the strength training, all of these things. And, Mike McKnight had set the Triple Crown record in 2019, so I was already inspired by him. And one of the things I love about him is that he seems like just a normal guy. He doesn't seem like a genetic freak. Like, with respect to Killian Jornet, Jim, Katie Scheid, like those types of people, like, you're not running that fast unless you get really lucky and you have, like, that body type. You know what I mean? You have to be lean, long legs, have this, like, perfect stride, and it's like, I just don't have that. So where am I going to go? It's like, okay, longer distances. It just seemed kind of obvious if I wanted to be competitive.
Mhm. No, I love that. And uh, one thing to kind of go back on is your delusional self belief. I love that. I read it and then heard you talk about it on the podcast with Joe too, and I loved hearing you kind of talk about it even more. My question for you, because you kind of brought this up, because like you had it when you were the cocky Killian, of it to be like that's probably not the smartest self, delusional self belief, but at the same point, like, it's gotten you to where you are today. So with that, like, do you think that was harmful to you at such a young age, having such delusional self-belief, or like do you think it was beneficial for you?
So I think ultimately it was probably beneficial in terms of achieving my life goals. I do think there's something kind of twisted about it. So to sort of divert for a second and like go way back to my childhood, I read the Iliad when I was pretty young,
Okay.
and in the Iliad, it's about the Trojan War, and Achilles, when who's the hero of the story, he's gonna go fight in Troy, right? And he's talking to his mom, who's a god, and she's like, "If you go, you're gonna die, but you'll be remembered forever." And you'll live, your name will live throughout history, right? And then he's like, if you stay, you're gonna have a happy life. You'll have family and kids you love, and your wife will be loving, and all the things are gonna go well for you. But ultimately, over time, you'll be forgotten.
Hmm.
And he chooses to go. So as a kid, I'm like, hell yeah, bro! Like that's the right move. Like
Hmm.
I identified with that decision so hard, and there's like still a piece inside my soul that does, even though logically I'm like, that is so stupid. Like, have a happy life. Who cares when you're dead whether or not your name is remembered, right? So the reason I bring up that story that I just call like the Achilles dilemma
Hmm.
is that the delusional self belief sort of feeds into that. Like, for whatever reason, I have had this idea since even before, getting into ultra running, that I could do something special. Like, what does something special mean? Who knows, But I just had this like little piece of me that was like, oh, you're like, you're kind of capable of doing whatever you want,
Hmm.
whatever you're gonna put your mind to. Like, and I still sort of have that. Like, if ultimately I think if I tried hard enough, I could probably get 80% of the way there if I wanted to learn quantum mechanics, Like, it would take years, it would take a lot of effort, but
Hmm.
maybe I think it could happen, right? So it's like I just have this little piece of me that's like, and maybe it was ingrained by my parents. We did lots of hard things when I was a kid, but I think some of it's just getting lucky with how your mind, like how the proclivities of your mind tend to operate. When I was 3, I was in swim lessons, and you got these little patches for the distances you swam, and all the older kids were getting the 1,000-meter patches, and I was like, I want that. So I swam for 2 hours as a 3-year-old and swam 1,000 meters. Like, why?
Oh.
Why was I doing that? It's not like my parents were like trying to, already create endurance athletes at the age of 3. Like, that's not what was happening. It was just like something in my brain was like, oh, I can do this. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded, wandering way of answering that question, but I do think it helps with the delusional self-belief, helps you achieve your goals,
Hmm.
but I do think you also need like a little bit of logic on
Hmm.
and a little bit of like clear thinking on that. Because like, if I was Achilles right now and I was presented with the dilemma, I stay with my family, right?
Hmm.
Like, that's the better decision. So ultimately, you can't take the delusional self belief all the way to like, I am legacy focused, because I think then that becomes egocentric and maladaptive to like your own mental health, the outcomes of your life, the outcomes for people around you. But if you can find the balance between that like egocentric delusional self belief and the delusional self belief that's going to help you succeed, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, and that's so, so true. And especially with how we have social media and how everything is very driven in today's age, I feel like. But that is like a prime point. If you can have that happy medium balance where it's not ego driven, but yet you're still having that self or a delusional self belief that you can be something that is kind of out of reach and hard to do, is not going to be an easy way to get there. That's the type of drive and push that you want to go towards, not like I want to be a billionaire because I want to have A, B, and C and do all, like all,
Yeah.
the egotistical aspect of it. So no, I can completely agree. And that's a great answer. I love to hear that. And I assumed nothing less than, great conversation in this. Um, but, and you kind of touched on this, and I'm making another crazy right turn. But something I love that you do and I do as well, I do, maybe not as much as you, but we've talked about routine and how we're very routine. We have morning routine, and you mentioned doing meditation. So I don't know if you've been asked this, and if I have, I'm sorry, but I would like to know, for everyone to know as well, like, what is your morning routine? Like, how routine are you, and what's that kind of look like for you?
Sure. Extreme. If there's like a scale of routine oriented versus not, I'm like a 9.5 out of 10 on the routine oriented side of things for sure. Uh, so it takes, every now and then this does get interrupted by just time constraints if I have things that need to happen. But typically, I will, and if I can get enough sleep, like I'll wake up earlier to be able to get my routine in, right?
Mhm.
So I wake up, I make coffee, and I sit and I read for an hour. I don't open my phone. I'm not looking at social media. Like, this is my time to kind of kickstart my day in a thoughtful way, right? So I'll drink 2 cups of coffee. That's delicious. I love coffee so much. And I will sit in my very comfortable recliner and I'll read whatever book is on the docket for that day. I try to kind of fluctuate between philosophy, fiction, and nonfiction. So I get a wide variety of kind of inputs to my brain in that way. And then after that, I will walk the dog. So it's about a 2-mile walk that I do. And so that's kind of like my physical warm up for the day, in addition to my mental warm up of reading. And then after all of that, I feel kind of settled and ready to like go run or hop on some meetings or lift or whatever I need to do. But I do think like these ritualistic, strict routines help establish the foundation for like the things you're building that day,
Mhm.
So whenever I don't get to have that routine, my mind is just like a little bit baffled for the rest of the day. It's just like a little bit out of place. My thoughts aren't as clear. My decisions feel a little bit cloudy for whatever reason. And so for me, it's like that the ritual of going through those motions, literally, it's like, you know, unlocking the correct doors to allow the day to be successful. And it's not that the day is going to be the same, being a coach and stuff, you're talking to different people every day. You have different problems to solve every day. Being an athlete, same thing, right? And being a person, like things can come up. But what the routine allows you to do is better improvise around things. And so
Mhm.
the like having a good routine almost allows you to deal with those out of routine moments even better because you're set up successfully for the unexpected circumstances that might arise in life.
Yeah, yeah. I feel exactly the same way. And it's so funny, like to the point where if my routine is not as normal as it usually is, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be a rough day, maybe, And that's just I do need to get out doing that. But it's funny, and um, I do feel like it just kind of sets, like you mentioned, your brain up to like have a good day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you've done all the things that like make you feel good and get primed and ready for the day. And it's makes highly encourage them. But do you have an evening routine or anything of that nature where like you have an evening shutdown type deal?
So it's not quite as strict. I mean, I will typically, Susie, my wife, and I will like play like the New York Times games, like the
Mhm.
Wordle and the connections and stuff. Kind of, typically like half an hour, 45 minutes or something before going to bed. I mean, uh, the evening is kind of our time together. So we like to watch TV. I'll do my mobility routines and that sort of thing. Walk the dog again in the evening. So it's not the same every day. Whereas like I like to my morning routine, I like to translate it even when I'm traveling. I want to do the same things as much as possible, even if I'm in an Airbnb or in a different country, like all of those things. So that one is much more strict. Whereas the evening routine is a little bit less, um, specific. But I mean, I do still try to have like 30 minutes of reading, so I'm not paying attention to a screen and then immediately trying to close my eyes and fall asleep. So there's like a few things I try to do there, but no, it's not nearly as foundational to my day. And honestly, I feel like I sleep just fine most days, especially you're in training or you're busy. It's like I do enough that I just end up tired at the end of the day. So I don't feel like I have to do much extra to like facilitate a good night of sleep.
Yeah, like you don't need that wind down in order to get a good night's sleep. Because honestly, you're probably freaking exhausted from everything going on, not only training, but
Yeah.
coaching and everything else, which is really, really cool. So I had to ask, and I was like, I'm super curious. So let's hear what Killian does morning and night, but super cool. And you also kind of mentioned this, so this is a good segue, but you mentioned like phone time, being on your phone. And we have talked about this because you, sir, have blown up on social media, which means you have a new thing that you have to take care of now, which, not to say you have to, but you are like diving into social media and kind of, just sharing your journey and the things that you do, which is amazing and is really, really cool. But how hard has that been for you in transitioning from like, I assume someone that never really got on social media too much. Maybe I know like you write a lot and that's a whole different ballgame. But you just probably check social media every once in a while and now it's probably feels like a chore. So how's that going for you?
I wouldn't say it feels like a chore just yet. I'm sure it could get to that point, and with certain things going on in the background, like social media will be more and more a part of like my job.
Mhm.
So I plan what I would like to do is kind of once I am in back into a routine with a lot of like the life stuff, is just kind of have like hours set aside in the day where like, okay, this is the social media time, and it's basically like, okay, I have a meeting with an athlete, it's like
Mm-hmm.
this is the time I'm dealing with this specific thing, right? So that's kind of my plan approaching it. But ultimately it's like, how do you avoid becoming a narcissist? That's the real question of social media. And I think that a lot of people fail, right? Like I think our culture is quite self-obsessed in that way, and then like entitled in that people should be paying attention to me. I mean, I find it kind of baffling that people want to pay attention to me. So there's like two sides of the coin for me, where I'm like, I'm just some guy living a life, and I'm like wandering around and people find it interesting, so that's cool. But it also does, it like weirds me out a little bit, like I immediately after Moab, when my follower count was exploding, I like made my Strava private. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to interact with people on Instagram and that sort of thing. I am less happy for people to know my location day by day, right? So there's a privacy aspect that I think I will handle differently from somebody else, which is totally fine. Like I think most decisions there are legitimate, right? But yeah, I mean, I have been more active on social media. I think now that like an incentive structure is set up to where like, okay, this can be part of my career moving forward. So there's a reason to be more active.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas previously there really wasn't. And so that's been an aspect. But yeah, it's like, and I still haven't figured out a perfect way to do it. I don't want to be the person who's checking Instagram every hour or every few minutes, and when I'm around friends and stuff. And so like, post Mo, and I already did this before Moab too. But like if I'm at dinner at a friend's house, I leave my phone in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's in the center console, and I'm not even able to pay attention to it if I have other things that I want to be doing. I'm still going on runs a few times a week where I'm not taking my phone, and I still get my contemplative time, yada yada. So there's ways that I have kind of figured out how to deal with it, but I'm sure that it will be an evolving process where I just attempt to thread the line between kind of staying active enough and being engaged and replying to people's comments, because I do want people to think of me as approachable,
Mm-hmm.
because I do think that I am, I want to help people and whatnot. But there's also the line like, if someone DMs me and they ask a few questions and then I don't answer for a couple days, and they send like a message that's like 3 question marks, so like, why haven't you responded yet? Like, I'm not the person who's going to be immediately responsive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's I think there's a line there, and I don't know exactly where I will end up, how I will end up threading it. It's all still extremely new.
Yeah, and I think how you're approaching it, like in the sense of like time blocking it, having certain times where you go and get in onto it is huge, and that will definitely cut time for you to be like, oh, I'm just sitting here, let me check my phone or anything of that nature. It having those hard boundaries is good, and setting them early is really important. It sounds like you're already there, but I'm sure, as we all know, hiccups will happen, life will happen, and you may catch yourself doom scrolling when you're like, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah,
But one thing I think, and it's crazy, and you kind of talk about this, and I'll just say it, but I feel like a lot of people, when they send messages, they automatically assume they need a response right away. And no offense, that's freaking crazy. You know what I mean? Like
crazy.
you as not you, but like a human being doesn't have the, how should I say this? So like back in the day, right? I always think of this. Like we used to communicate via mail to talk to each other. And they used to have a messenger or someone that would send a piece of mail that it could take days to get to. So for you to not respond for a couple of days, like it's not that you're purposely like, oh, blah, 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 just sent me a message. I'm gonna ignore him for 4 days. You know what I mean? It's I haven't even probably seen this. And if you maybe did glance and see that you have 75 messages you got to return to, that's very overwhelming, and it's not something that like you potentially have time to do for a couple days, because no matter what, that's going to take time, and time is very valuable, and you have a lot
Yeah,
going on right now, so it is a hard boundary to set, and I'm sure at the end of the day lots of feelings get hurt, not from you but because of just the crap they think up of in their head, which it's just tough, and you can't handle that, and you can't do anything other than to be your true self and do what you have to do from time to time again. And hopefully people will understand, like, you just, not you personally, but like people can't respond immediately, and that's
yeah. I
just
mean,
how life is.
we're we're busy. Like people
Yeah.
are busy, and like being a semi-public figure or whatever, it's like there's this like odd power dynamic where someone approaching you could potentially know a lot about you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
If someone has listened to me on enough podcasts, they probably can predict how I will think about things, right?
Hmm.
Hopefully not completely. Hopefully I still, maintain an air of unpredictability with how my thoughts might go. But I don't know them at all,
Hmm.
So there's the social media and podcasts and long form content does kind of create these like parasocial relationships where people actually probably do know me pretty well because I am kind of an open book on podcasts, right? So they
Hmm.
actually do know me to some extent, but then I don't even know their name, right? So
Yeah.
there's like that's a weird power dynamic that is difficult to navigate as the person who is the locus of the attention.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so hard because then I have had to do this, and I'm sure you'll do it way more than I will. But it's like you have to ask their name, like, "Oh, what's your name?" And then they're like, "Yeah, I've listened in this and this," and you're like, "Awesome! Like, are you training for a race?" So like, you have to like you as a human, you want to know more about them, but how do you
Yeah.
approach that because they already know everything? So it's just that weird dynamic of trying to be a human and actually chat with them and get to know them as well.
Yeah. And then I always feel bad if I'm like, oh, it's nice to meet you. And the person's like, oh, we met, a year ago at whatever race. And I'm like, sorry. Like, like I'm bad with names to begin with. And then maybe I met you in the middle of the night and you were volunteering at an aid station. Like there's no chance I'm going to remember that. Right. But I never want to seem like I'm careless in that regard. But it's also like, it's all kind of overwhelming.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And it's literally happened overnight for you. So, and
Yeah.
that's I remember we chatted like not too long after the race and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I have so many questions." And the biggest thing is you're just like this is just I think this is one of the things that you said and I'll butcher exactly how you said it, but you're just like it's so overwhelming and I'm so grateful and I don't know what to do with like all of the feelings. And I was like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like I can only imagine." So and since we're talking about kind of explain that for us, like you not overnight, within a couple days, your social media. So from a point of a start of a race to a finish of a race, your social media aspect blew up and you won Triple Crown, you know what I mean? You won Moab, like so many things all happened at once. You had people reaching out to you, people interested in having you like be a part of their team or their community. And like how was that? What was that like for you?
So, I mean, first of all, it's all extremely flattering, So it is a very positive thing, but new experiences cause anxiety because they're new, just
Hmm.
to begin with. So like, I have been just like more anxious and just a little bit like on edge about some of this stuff, But I mean, for context, it's like day one of Moab, I had about 4,500 Instagram followers. I'm now at I think 43,000, and at the end of the race, it was close to 30. So it's
Hmm.
continued to grow, but like the race was crazy. Um, and so, it took me a week and a half or thereabouts to, get through all the messages of congratulations and stuff. I wanted to say thank you to everybody and that sort of thing. It took a long time to sift through like podcast invitations and that sort of thing. And I'm like, how do I want to approach this? Do I want to vet this podcast? Like, should I go listen to some episodes to make sure they're not a crazy person? How do I want to do that? And I still haven't really figured out the answer to that. So some of these questions I think are still up in the air, and everyone's going to have different approaches to them, right? Thankfully, I've had some great people like Andy Glaze. I talked to him for a while about how to handle some of the social media stuff, and he had great advice. Obviously, he's got a huge following, and he's part of the reason that I kind of blew up because he shouted me out, and so I have been lucky to have some people in my corner with some words of wisdom, which I think is huge, just because I'm like not the person well equipped to deal with this because I'm just like not particularly savvy about how to navigate social media spaces. So I'm getting better at that, and I'm like want to learn how to do it better. But yeah, like overwhelming is a good word for it. But if you could like make overwhelming have a slightly less negative connotation and like a slightly more positive connotation, like, I don't actually know what that word is,
Hmm.
but it's been it's been like sitting in like a warm, nice ocean, but just having waves like smash on you, you know? So it's not cold, you're not scary, there's no undertow that's dragging you out, but you are just kind of like, holy shit, like all this is happening at once, you know, every now and then you breathe in some seawater and you're like, God damn it. So that's kind of what it's been like.
Yeah, what a good analogy. Super funny. Like, sadly, I hate to tell you that. But I can only imagine. And you're doing everything and anything you can, which is awesome. And we've chatted a little bit about it. And I remember you telling me Andy have reached out and been such a like helping hand, and that's awesome. And that just goes to show that like we're all in this together. You had mentioned to me that you were talking to Alyssa too, who's a good friend of yours, and she was trying to help you
Yeah,
out. You and Joe talk a lot, and it's just like all of the people you have that were always there, or new people coming into your life to support and help you, which is awesome and is a part of why I love the ultra running community, which is really really cool. um
totally.
and I know, like, obviously you have Cocodona next year, and you've talked about some FKTs. So do you have 2026 planned out yet officially, or what's that look like for you?
Yeah, so right now, Cocodona is the only race I am signed up for. I would like to do the Colorado Trail FKT.
Mhm.
I'm in the process of talking to some different brands about things, and I think ultimately brands do not like FKTs quite as much just because of the like attention economy aspect to them.
Mhm.
So I am open to that changing if some partnership would prefer me to do another race. Sign up for Mammoth. It's not like I'm gonna have a bad time at Mammoth.
Yeah.
So something like that. But yeah, Cocodona is the only like 100% solid. Like I'm doing Cocodona, so that I know for sure. And the Colorado Trail is going to happen at some point.
Mhm.
The nice thing is, being 30, I'm still young in the sport, so I've got like I don't have to rush things. I would love to do tour. I don't even know how to get into tour, and so I haven't even like done the research for how to jump through all those hoops. So I mean, that could also be a possibility, but yeah, the second half of the year is semi up in the air still.
Very cool. And nothing wrong with that. You got plenty of time.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's really cool to also see like that you want to get into FKTs, because I know they're getting bigger, and like we have tons of amazing ultra runners that are out there crushing them, but I still feel like it's not really talked about. I feel like a lot of
yeah,
like you have your certain little cliques, I hate to say, in the social or in the ultra running world, on social media especially, that like you do see a lot more of like FKTs compared to like actual races. But I think it's just something that is still not talked very well about, and I would love for it to blow up a little more in the sport and for it to be a
yeah.
little more known about. um but I mean, we'll see. um
Yeah, I mean, I think with like one of the things that I find so intriguing about FKTs now is I think a 200 is like triple the meaningful experience of a 100 miler.
mhm.
It like goes up by more than the distance. And so I'm like, what's the limiting factor here? If I run 500 miles, does that give me 10 times the experience of a 200 miler?
Right.
It seems possible to me. It doesn't seem like there's an obvious reason why it would like the gains from your like spiritual mental experience would taper off. So I like on a personal level, I'm just super interested in that aspect.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so my question for you then is, where like what would be it for you? Like what would be, maybe not distance wise, because I mean, you could do a whole bunch. There's a variety, but is there something that maybe is like that end all, not end all, because I doubt it's going to be an end for you, but like is there something out there that like is like far within reach, where like younger self is going to look back when you get older and be like, I didn't think I could do this and I'm doing it, just like I'm sure 20 some year old cocky Killian is thinking, in comparison to now.
Yeah, I mean, I did just get a tattoo sleeve yesterday, and part of it is a quote from my one of my favorite bands, Ghost. They had a song called the chorus goes, "The road to nowhere is long," and that's
Mm.
kind of been my theme for the year. So I do think like, what is the be all end all is kind of a question that's like impossible to answer, because ultimately I think that we are just in the ether until we're not, right? And
Mhm.
so uh, yeah, that's my zoomed out answer to the question. My actual answer to the question in a more practical, like reality based way of speaking, is I think something like the Appalachian Trail. I don't know. I have I have the also thoughts like, I wonder if it's possible to run across the middle of Australia. I've never been to Australia. I know the outback is just like a wasteland of nothingness, but who knows? Like, is that possible to do it? So it's like there's big exploration type goals like that I would just really love to just dip my toe into. And maybe it's not possible, maybe I start doing some research and it's like, no, like, this isn't going to happen. So, but I would really like to do something that either hasn't been done before or that's just like totally out of the ordinary in some way. Because I think that, and that hasn't been done before, it's not because I feel like I'm special, the one to do it. It's just like, I want to just I'm like seeking new experiences from like the human perspective. That's why I feel like it's so rewarding to be able to like push the 200s forward, because they're still new. It's like, these are new experiences for humanity, and they're like both new and old, because I do feel like there's like a connection to the past and in the suffering and the endurance and the persistence, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's like seeking out novelty is kind of part of the addiction,
Oh, for sure. And this kind of brings me in a question, like, there's so much unknown still. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah.
have just chipped away or like opened up the doors for so many people, I feel like, and so many new things to come about. Like, where do you kind of see these 200s going? Like, do you think they're going to continue just to get faster and faster? Like, what's your thought with that?
I mean, they will continue to get faster, I'm sure. There's going to be a limiting factor. Like, if you think about, it's most obvious the shorter the race. So if you think about like a 100-meter sprint in the Olympics, like eventually we're going to be measuring by millionths of a second or something like that.
Mhm, mhm.
So I don't think 200s are anywhere close to the tipping point where like, oh, our gains are going to be marginal. But I mean, we're going to see whose strategies win. Like, over the course of this year, we've kind of seen in the past couple of years, you've sort of seen two strategies emerge around sleek for these races. For instance, like, I was talking to Arlen Glick at Javelina, and we had a really interesting discussion about, like, so me and Rachel Entrekin have kind of decided, like, we're going to stop as little as possible and continue to push forward. Whereas
Mhm.
Jimmy Elam wins Mammoth, he stops for like 7 hours. I would probably be aiming to stop for less than 3 in that race. So his moving time much faster, his stop time much longer. On the other side, moving time slower, stop time much less. So what strategy will win between those two? Are they both equivalently valid? Like, I don't think we don't know the answer to this yet, because people have won these races, had really great times, put on great performances doing both things. And so I think ultimately what will happen with the 200s is either we will continue to have kind of like two parallel paths to success there, or one of those is going to kind of come out on top in the end. And we're going to see like, oh, even the people who are bad sleepers need to sleep more, or the people who feel like they can't really deal with sleep deprivation, like, you just got to suck that up. I think ultimately one of those, if I had to bet, I think one of those is going to win. Obviously, I hope my strategy is the winner, but
Yeah.
who knows? That's kind of the fun thing about the 200 space, is I feel like hundreds, I don't think we have a formula like we do. If you want to run a sub 3 hour marathon, like, you can just find a training plan online and just follow it, and you'll run a sub 3, right?
Mhm.
Hundreds, we're not quite there yet, but I think we're inching closer. And then 200s are just like, throw shit at the wall, see what sticks,
Yeah.
And a lot of it's luck, a lot of it's skill, a lot of it's individual. And so that's what I find kind of most exciting about the longer distances, multi-day events that just have, it's a jigsaw puzzle that never ends. Once you put a piece on the puzzle, someone comes along and takes away a piece. So it's like you're building Legos constantly and just having them shattered in front of you. But if you love the project, it's kind of fun, the fact that it feels endless.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's so true in the aspect of like the Lego piece. It's so funny you say that, but like, like, not you, I'm going to say, like, people have built a Lego set in 200s, and then they've been shattered and then rebuilt a little bit, reshattered, rebuilt. And I think the crazy part is, like, I also think there's like low key a couple people on the side, like, doing their own thing, building their own thing, that like one day we'll realize, like, this could be the example of like people that sleep a lot and then people don't sleep, faster moving times, slower moving times. Like, there eventually will be a point where both of these, like one is the way and one is not, but
Yeah.
you'll still have this person, I guarantee you, on the side, or a couple people doing it to try to prove like, no, this can happen. And for all we know, in 5 years, it's going to be like, that what we thought was right is actually wrong, and we're going to go to this other side. And that's
Yeah.
like the crazy thing with ultra running. But I do have a question in this. Like, do you think there, because like strategy is so important in 200s in the sense of like the logistics, the time and aid station, not involving sleep, just like being efficient and moving through. But do
Hmm.
you feel like there is any leeway or chance for it to get even better or like improve? I'm not saying like you have the way, but in that aspect of like, there becomes a point where you can't move faster than maybe 5 minutes in and out of an aid station. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that this year, definitely in Bigfoot and Moab, the second two, the last two races of the Triple Crown, I don't know where I'm trimming fat in my aid station
Mhm.
stops. You know what I mean? Like Moab, it could have been faster if I didn't have to deal with foot problems because of mud and rain and being wet all the time. But I did. So it's like, I don't know. I actually don't know how to make those more efficient. Like maybe someone is watching me and being like, look at this moron doing all these things he doesn't need to do. And they're going to figure it out better than I did. Right. So I'm totally open to that. But like me personally, I don't see how you become that much more efficient than I have been this year in aid stations. So I think for me, like my gains are going to come from the consistent work, like just getting
Mhm.
fitter, getting stronger, coming up with new ways to overcome the mental challenges, not getting even better at not succumbing to the little voice that's telling you to be comfortable. All of those things, maybe I will refine some fueling aspects. Maybe there'll be things that I add from like a supplement perspective. Maybe I'll try new shoes that, that there's like all these little marginal gains, but I do feel like the aid station side of things, it's like, I have no clue how I would make my aid stations faster. I don't know how I would be more efficient than I have been, because my crew is top notch. I feel like I don't have any wasted time. If you watch any of the reels that were getting produced during the race, I wasn't wasting time talking to anybody. It's like yeah, I feel like there's not a lot to trim off from an efficiency perspective at this point.
Yeah, and that's like incredible. And the more I was like thinking about 200s and like how it's going to change, because I do think that there's going to be a huge growth and boom, and
Yeah,
people are only going to get faster. But I was thinking like a lot of people will get faster from aid station transitions, because I think this
yeah,
year you really proved that like if you're fast and efficient in aid stations, like you're moving and grooving, and that's what we want in these things. But I was thinking of you, and like you were just so dialed in that I'm like, where can you pull out a minute? Like I don't know,
no clue. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, like I said, maybe Brody is sitting back there watching my aid stations, being like, "Hey, here's how I can make it better."
Mhm.
So hopefully that's happening, and then I can learn from that person.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna train with Rachel Entrican a little bit this winter, and hopefully more going into Cocodona, and hopefully there's stuff that I can learn from her, and maybe there's stuff that she can learn from me. So I think talking to other people who are trying to push the bar forward is hopefully going to be a way that we can all kind of make each other better.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And you're so right. And what's awesome about this ultra community is everyone's like willing to be like, dude, I saw you do this. Like, how'd you do that? Or,
Yeah,
maybe take a look at this, and this is how you could shave some time off and all of that good stuff. But that's like one of the amazing things about ultra running. And it's super cool that you get to train with Rachel. I'm sure you all will have a blast. Does she live
yeah,
near
that'll
you?
be fun. She's also in Colorado. I think about like 2 hours away. So I mean,
Very cool.
near enough to make things happen. But yeah, like I have tried to be as open as possible with how I feel like I've attained some success this year. And so at Moab, one of my athletes, George Cyrus, who ended up coming third in the race, Brody, who I was running with for the first 50 miles, like their aid station stops were way faster than they had both been at Bigfoot. And that's
Mhm.
because they heard me talk about that. And so, I was like, cool, like people are upping their game and changing things because of how I'm approaching this. Like there's nothing kind of more rewarding than sort of having other top-notch competitors being like, hey, how can I do things a little bit more like Kilian? Like that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. And I will just let you know to like toot your own horn right here on the podcast is like I've literally told people like, hey, did you see Killian's aid station transitions? Or like, I heard Killian explain this, like the metronome's a great thing. Like I get so many people that are like, I don't know what to do when like I can't run anymore. And I'm like, you just can't listen to that voice. And they're like, it's loud. I don't know what to do. And then I heard your analogy. I'm like, that's so amazing. Like tell people to, because it gives them something to focus on. Another thing is like I always hear like people tell other people like, why don't you count, like see how long you can count for, but like count 1 2, like count your steps, you know what I mean, but
Mm-hmm.
actually run in that aspect. They're great techniques, so you're already doing that, which is really really cool. So you need, you know, the pat in the back, the good job or whatever, you know, but you're definitely out there inspiring, encouraging a lot of people, and I really hope you realize what you've done and that like it's just, you know, you're just touching the surface so far.
Well, thanks. That's very nice to hear. I feel like my specific like philosophical beliefs are so oriented against like feeling pride. So I just feel so like grateful that anyone thinks that anything that I say has like any, you know, little tidbits of wisdom in it. And so it's cool to hear that, you know, the metronome thing. I've told that to a lot of people, and several athletes friends have said that it has helped them later in the race. So I'm like, awesome, you know, like that's cool that somewhere in Moab, my brain just like threw this at me, and it has also worked for other people. So yeah, it's cool to be able to influence others, and like, and you know, being a coach, you get to do this, you know, where you just help people achieve their goals, and that's a very rewarding experience, you know. So yeah, I hope that anyone who, you know, tries using my mental strategies and has some success, like that is just as rewarding as having, you know, Brody and George kind of improve their aid stations because of things that I've said. You know, it's like each of those things is they're two sides of how to be successful in these races. And so yeah, I'm really happy that if anyone finds anything I've said helpful, it's just like uh hard to describe how nice that feels, you know.
Yeah, no. And I promise you have so much knowledge to give to people. And like the little bit we've chatted and just getting to know you more as a person and us talking philosophy, which I freaking love. But, you know, I've learned so much from you just within that time frame of us knowing each other, which we really haven't even known each other that long, which is crazy to think.
Yeah.
You know, but like again, I'm not trying to toot your horn, but I really hope you continue to share the knowledge that you do know, because you are inspiring and encouraging a ton of people. And I love, like, that's what I'm about. That's why I do the stupid things I do on social media, A, to be funny and to help encourage anybody. And, you know, teach as many people as possible. And I think you have so much more knowledge to give. And I know you're very like humbled and you like to like keep things kind of, not to say low key to like keep them to yourself, but you're just not one to like, I guess, speak out. And I hope this is like a good slap in the butt to get you out there and doing it, because you can definitely encourage a lot more people and inspire tons.
Well, thanks. I mean, I like being on podcasts. You know, I feel like long form content, some of my writing, that's kind of those are my strengths that, in where I feel like I'm best able to express myself. So yeah, and if people listen to them and like them, then that's even better. But it is just, yeah, it's strange. You know, it just overall, some of the things, like when I talk about the metronome, or I come up with like the castle analogy, and people tend to seem to connect with those, I'm just like, man, these are just like, I don't feel like I discovered them, you know what I mean? Like they just like, they're just like there, and I'm like, oh cool, like I just happened upon this thing. So yeah, there's something in my system that's like oriented against taking compliments, but I mean, I do appreciate all of it, and it's like, uh I hope that I can just continue to um you know, remain grounded. That's kind of my goal throughout this whole process.
Yeah. Well, and from the little bit that we've chatted and we've, you know, gone back and forth, you are still the same Kilian I've known before the Triple Crown. So nothing has changed. If anything, you're even more like calm and relaxed. I know you mentioned like you're feeling anxious at times, and that's completely understandable, but you have really like come to and like, yeah, this is all crazy, but like I keep taking a step back and like, oh my gosh, this has been wild and amazing. So you're still the same Killian, which is awesome.
Thanks. Yeah,
Okay.
just trying to embrace new things.
Yes, change sucks, but it's a good thing. This is all good change.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, before I go, A, well, two things, let's say. So A, did the podcast exceed your expectations? Is it a little under par? Like let's be honest.
No, we're doing great. I mean, I wanted to talk. I was hoping that you would start and like we'd go for the philosophy angle right away, since that's like what we in like private conversations end up talking about a lot. So it's been perfect. Yeah. I mean, I've had mostly very good interviews on podcasts, but a couple where I kind of get asked the same questions over and over and over again. And so I feel like I'm giving kind of rehearsed answers, which I have not done here. So, it's like we've attacked things from a different angle. And I mean, if people want to hear about the Triple Crown specifically, they can go listen to any number of podcasts. But I like the zoomed out perspective that we've been able to take here and kind of add in, a little bit more of a contemplative flavor to some running related musings.
For sure. And so I was like, before we get on the podcast, I was like thinking to myself, like, if we could sit and talk about philosophy for 5 hours, we would. I was like, but I have to try to remember, like, this is a running podcast, so I need to talk to him a little bit about running. So I was like, well, just try to see where I can go with it. But no, I think it's been a great podcast. I think it's a different point of view, which is definitely what I wanted, because you and I are very in touch with philosophy, and we chat about it. And one thing I did also want to ask, there's another question. Me and you talk books all the time, and you're always trying to get me, you're supposed to actually get me a list of books to read.
I have yet to follow through on that, but I will.
That is okay. I kind of forgot until right now. So, but I have heard you talk about one book on a different podcast, but like, if I was like, Kilian, what are 3 books that you would recommend for anyone to read, and like a little bit of reason why? What are those 3?
Sure. That's very difficult to answer. Blood Meridian is the first one. It's my favorite book. I think that Cormac McCarthy is probably the best American writer to have ever lived. And I think that his specific style, if you love landscapes, you will love Cormac McCarthy. Like, he is the best descriptor of the world that I've ever encountered. But I think, and I have a non-traditional interpretation of his entire oeuvre, his like all of the books he's written. They're very violent, they're very dark seeming on the surface, but I think that he knew how good of a writer and he was, and so I think he was pointing out metaphorically that, look at how beautiful the prose that I am producing is, and it exists amongst the horror of the things I am describing. And so I think his whole work serves to illustrate the fact that amongst many, aspects of the world that we wish were different and that can cause a lot of suffering and humanity's more, negative attributes, let's say, amongst all of that lives just this intense beauty and magic that you can experience seeing a sunrise, a night sky, wind rustling, some leaves in the trees. All of these things are experiences that are available to you day to day. And if you can enjoy that beauty whilst also acknowledging that the flip side exists, like that's the balance you want to strike. So I think that his entire like litany of books that are horrifying on the surface are actually, I have a more optimistic take on kind of what he is trying to tell us. So Blood Meridian is my favorite. Let's see. I think that for another novel, I think The Stranger by Albert Camus is an excellent exploration of existentialism and just kind of, I think humans find ourselves unique among the animal kingdom, at least that we know of, in our knowledge that we're going to die. And like that, we can look up at the night sky and kind of think like, oh, I have pictures. We have deep field telescope pictures where I'm seeing an uncountable number of stars, and then in these pictures there are an uncountable number of galaxies with another uncountable number of stars, right? And so helping to deal with kind of that scary small feeling and translating it in your head to a really meaningful small feeling, like feeling small in the best way possible. I think The Stranger by Camus is a really good way to do that. And then for something nonfiction, I would go for Guns, Germs, and Steel. If you've ever wondered why the world looks the way it does, I think that's kind of the best explanation, or best attempt at an explanation for like, hey, what's going on here? Why did the circumstances create, this specific set that I find myself in my life. And then for philosophy, honestly, meditations is, I think that's the one I'd most universally recommend, because I think it's easily digestible and has kind of the most applicable wisdom for daily life, even though I find the Stoics somewhat joyless,
Yeah.
So I think as long as you go into it thinking like, okay, I don't want to become the placid flat line, but hey, this can help me deal with adversity. That's probably the best one. It's also short, so you can read it in a few days.
Yeah, no. Love the list. I will have to get each and every one, except for meditations. I do have that and I've listened and read it a few times. But one thing I want to like say, and you kind of said this with Stoics, is like you said, everyone, I feel like when they read it or talk about it's like the straight line and or like just being content with highs and lows. And I think what you always say and have said is like people need to take some of that, not all of it. You know what I mean? Because like when bad things happen, it is really good if you can manage and stay like at that even balance. Like, yes, handle and deal with what you need to, but don't go into such a hard down and then hard up and then hard down. We want to stay level, but also like know the joys of life, where like it could be the birth of a child. It could be the simple thing of sitting outside on a mountaintop late at night looking up and seeing the sky, the moon, like things like that, like taking in things like that in comparison of just like kind of living very blah all day every day is not what we want. But I love that you do talk about that. And we could talk about this for days, so I won't go there. But
let me just interject one quick thing. I mean, I've sort of been playing with the idea of calling myself a Stoic Epicurean, and those two philosophies are sort of opposites. If in like the academic world, like Epicurus was like all about sort of seeking pleasure. That's at least the stereotype. I think he's more complicated than that. But I do think if you can take like the best of the Stoics and the best of the Epicureans, then you have the philosophy for life, like the ability to enjoy, but also the ability to persevere and be resilient.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. Oh my gosh, so we're gonna have to have you back on to talk about this. No, I'm just kidding. But honestly, like, loved having you on the podcast. And I know you write and you have your blog on Substack, so I will have all of that information in the show notes so people can go and follow. But you've kind of talked about this, and I don't think I've ever asked you this, but do you plan to ever write a book? You've wrote a novel?
I mean, I have written 3 novels in my life. I think 2 of them are terrible and one of them is pretty good. I haven't sent off any, literary queries for quite some time, so I'd like to get back to that. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll have a following big enough someday that I feel like I can self-publish, But life's been crazy. I have an idea for a short story that I'd like to write, so hopefully that will be an area that I can continue to explore in my life, But yeah, I mean, there are definitely there's enough ideas inside me that I feel like I've got plenty of creative juices for some literature in the future. But who knows? I would like to go back over the novel that I think is actually pretty good and kind of refine it further before kind of putting it out into the world. But yeah, there will be ideally that will happen at some point.
All right, so now I just need to keep reminding you, like, hey, I'm waiting to see this novel be published.
Okay, yeah, I'll do my best.
Yeah, very cool. I'd love to hear it, but again, thank you so much for being on the podcast and chatting. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to, and we chat weekly, and I look forward to every week that we get to chat, and appreciate you being on the team of the Everyday Ultra and just kicking ass and taking names. So thank you again for being on the podcast.
Well, right back at you, Liz. We always have great conversations, and this one was no exception to that.
For sure.